The family that vacations together stays together. At least, that was the plan. Except now, the dastardly desk clerk is saying he can't confirm your connecting rooms.
Wait, what?
That's right, ma'am. You have rooms 201 and 709.
No, we cannot be 5 floors away from our kids.
The doors have double locks. They'll be fine.
When you want connecting rooms confirmed before you arrive, it matters where you stay.
Welcome to Hilton. I see your connecting rooms are already confirmed.
Hilton, for the stay.
All right, listen up, nacho chips. Quiet down, crispy potatoes. This is the moment Velveeta's been preparing you for, and you're not about to crack under pressure. Today's the day to go all in on the drip. Velveeta's Heat and Eat Queso is the MVP of any game day spread, so stick by them, and you'll be golden. Now get out there and make delicious history. No tailgate party is complete without Velveeta.
Welcome back to Generals and Napoleon. We are very honored to have the esteemed Joshua Meeks joining us once again from the U.S. Naval War College. Hello, Josh.
How's it going?
Good, man. Thanks for joining me again.
Always happy.
Yeah. For those of you unfamiliar with Josh, he joined us on our previous episode, Clausewitz versus Jomini. And today we're going to talk about a battle. And which battle are we going to jump into today, Josh?
Battle of Trafalgar. I would say one of maybe the most kind of pivotal, significant moments. It's hard always to say like, oh, this battle really turned the tide of history. I think this one kind of did.
Yeah, it rings a bell. Sounds familiar. Yeah. Before we get into that, I have a disclaimer Josh is going to read for us, and then we'll jump in.
Yeah, so I am a professor at the U.S. Naval War College, but in this capacity, I am speaking entirely in my personal capacity. My views here don't represent those of the United States government, Department of Defense, Department of the Navy, or the U.S. Naval War College.
Some other things Josh is doing. He's actually doing an event, I think in January, at a bookstore called Politics and Prose, Prose, in Washington, D.C. And what is that about?
It's going to be a virtual class, a Zoom class just on, I have one I think coming up in October, and then one in January, February. The one in October is going to be on the Three Musketeers, Alexander Dumas, just a couple weeks blitzing through the Three Musketeers, and then taking a little bit more time to go contemplative and deep into the Count of Monte Cristo. These are two of my favorite books, and I actually got connected with this bookstore. They asked me to do a class on Horatio Hornblower last year. And that was fun, right? That was getting to talk about naval history. But then they said, what else can you do? I'm like, let's try to find some fun French history. And so we turned to Count of Monte Cristo and Three Musketeers. So that's something that you can find on the internet and register for the class. And I'd love to see people there.
So if you're a fan of D'Artagnan or Jailbreaks, then this would be for you. Yeah.
Revenge.
Revenge, right.
Who's
right.
not a fan of revenge, right?
Well, the battle we're going to talk about today is kind of like a novel in its own right. And you kind of touched on earlier, I mean, there's 1,000 naval battles in British naval history. Why is this battle the battle that everyone loves to talk about?
So I think there's a couple reasons for it, a couple good reasons for it, and then maybe a couple bad reasons for it. I mean, it does establish in the short term and in the medium term command of the sea. Right. This is where the British are able to say unequivocally, we control the waves. This is in part not just because the British win. That matters, right? It matters that they win this battle, but it's always two-sided. You also have to look at what happens next. And Napoleon doesn't challenge the British for command of the seas after this point. He tries to pull other levers to attack the British. But from this point on, it's very easy to just kind of take a look and say, the British are unchallenged, essentially, for almost the next 100 years at sea, if not more, right? We'll call it, a little bit over 100 years before anyone really significantly challenges the British. And it's rare that you can say that one battle established a century of dominance, right? Usually it'll be relitigated at another battle or even another generation.
Right.
But for Trafalgar, one battle establishes a century of naval dominance, and it outlives any of the people involved, right? And that's remarkable.
Well, yeah, and the other striking thing about it is such a lopsided affair, but at the tail end of it, the leader of the British Navy, Nelson, gets killed. So it's like a bittersweet moment.
It is. Well, and I think this actually gets to maybe one of the I don't want to call it a bad reason why it's so memorable, but it's less legitimate in the context of the battle itself, is that it's Nelson, right? It's a cult of personality. And not only is this a cult of, like, Nelson already had a cult of personality, right? He was a larger than life figure at the time of Trafalgar. Mm-hmm. And then when he dies afterwards, it crystallizes that legend. And so that the legend of Nelson and the legend of Trafalgar kind of get mixed in together in a lot of ways. And because both are very definitive stopping points, right? Nelson does not sully his reputation afterwards, right? Or he doesn't do something else that drowns out the majesty of his victory at Trafalgar. That's it. That is the beginning of the story of British naval dominance at sea. And it's the end of the story for Nelson. And so because it is such a final moment, both in terms of the political strategic landscape, but also in terms of the cultural landscape of who Nelson is to the British imagination, it serves as this focal point of we don't need another story, right? We don't need another hero. We have the perfect story. We have the perfect hero. We're happy here. And so that leads to it having an incredible weight in the British and then broadly the public imagination.
Right. And we'll get more into it on the legacy portion at the end here. But yeah, that kind of sets the table. Let's talk about strategic background. So it's 1803, 1804. Napoleon planned to invade Britain. For those of you keeping score at home, the last time the English coast was successfully invaded was 1066. So it's been a while. French and Spanish fleets needed to secure control of the English Channel. So what is Napoleon's plan here, and how did the British plan to stop him?
Yeah, so Napoleon's plan, and I don't want to throw shade at Napoleon, right? He's brilliant in a lot of ways. I don't know that he shines at naval strategy, but his plan isn't a bad one, right? He knows that he has an army massed at the English Channel, and he's not really doing anything else with him in 1804-ish, right? 1804 going into 1805. He's not really doing anything else with them. He is ready to invade, but he knows that he needs to force the English Channel. This is the perennial strategic advantage that the British have, is that you have to be able to have control over the English Channel. Because what you're going to do with all of those troops is you're going to put them on flotillas, you're going to put them on transports, and they're going to be a sitting duck to anything with a cannon. Even if there is a battle, even if you still have to worry, as long as you can have some control for a week, call it control for a week, you get those troops on the transports, you cross, and you just overwhelm the British home defense. That's Napoleon's plan, and that in and of itself is not a bad plan. Mm-hmm. What he realizes in this kind of strategic chain of thought is, well, how do I force the channel? Well, luckily I do have the Spanish as allies. I can bring far more ships to bear, so many more. This is just a weight of numbers, right? I can bring so many more ships to bear than the British can. So that's what I'm going to do. So then the question becomes, how do I do that? And the answer it gets a lot more complicated. There is a fleet at Toulon. There's a fleet at Brest, and there's a fleet at Cadiz. If you're going if you can imagine the map, right? The fleet at Toulon, it goes out and it breaks out from Nelson, who is doing a loose blockade, collects the fleet at Cadiz. This is all good. This is what Napoleon wants. Then, the Spanish fleet at Cadiz. Then they go to the Caribbean.
Yeah. It's an amazing idea. The ocean is not like crossing the land. I think Napoleon probably got confused, but it's way different. It's way harder. So yeah, to take both of those fleets and then go to the West Indies and then come back, right? It just seems crazy to me.
So the thought is, there is a part that's crazy and there's a part that makes sense. The part that makes sense is that the British do have a lot of interests in the Caribbean. You can almost call it a center of gravity, certainly an economic center of gravity, that Napoleon sees as a vulnerability, where he says, if I threaten the British interest in the Caribbean, they have to respond. They will respond by sending ships, and then it'll be a bait and switch. I'll then swing back to Europe, have my troops or have my ships swing back to Europe, and the Channel and the fleet at Brest, they will be even less well defended because the British are going over to the Caribbean. That's not a bad idea, right? It's maneuver. The problem that he runs into, there's two real problems. One is, as you said, I don't think he really grasps the impact that this is going to have on his fleet itself, because the logistics, the supply, even the experience of going across the Atlantic makes it more difficult for the ships to then do their job of forcing the English Channel. The British have ships at the English Channel just sitting there waiting. And now you're doing a double transatlantic voyage in quick, rapid succession. That there's wear and tear on those ships. There's wear and tear on the men. There's wear and tear on the supply chain. And that's something that is difficult to, like Villeneuve, the French admiral, he's aware of that. And that kind of factors into his decision making. But that's the idea, is to combine the fleets and then use those fleets to go to Brest, combine with the fleet at Brest to then force the English Channel. If that works, you're going to have a fleet of about 60 plus ships of the line going up against, at best, half that number for the Channel fleet. It did have potential. The idea had a lot of potential.
Yeah, but it also seems like, all right, we're going to have you fight a very exhausting battle. However, you're going to run a marathon first.
Basically. And the other thing that I think Napoleon wanted to play a little bit of a double game here, in terms of, if the British don't send a fleet to protect the West Indies, the Caribbean, then we just hang out in the Caribbean and have gains there. Yes, I'd love to be able to force the English Channel, but if they don't do what's expected and defend it, then I gain something. I don't gain England, but I do hurt England by taking their stuff here.
Yeah.
That doesn't pan out, though. Villeneuve doesn't do it. And that's problematic.
Yeah, let's discuss the three commanders. Obviously, Horatio Nelson, as we've talked about ad nauseum, one of the greatest naval commanders of all time. Who are these other two fellows? Villeneuve, the Vice Admiral for the French Navy, and Admiral Gravina, the commander of the Spanish Navy. They're just three very different personalities, right?
They are. Nelson, and I've done a good bit of research with Nelson, like one of my favorite historian stories. I don't think I said this last time, but I don't know if I would have had a reason to, but it's still one of my favorite stories. Is I'm flipping through a logbook in Bastia, in Corsica, and not somewhere that you're looking for Horatio Nelson stuff, but he did do stuff in Corsica early in his career. And so I'm flipping through this logbook, kind of doing research on another project, and out drops this handwritten note from Horatio Nelson. And I'm like, this is really cool. Like, this is the kind of thing that, if it was in Britain, would be in a different environment, right? Like, this is, it's very handwritten, very, very, very cool. But even then, reading about his time in Corsica, reading that note, he is a aggressive commander. He is a charismatic commander. He loves to take risks. He has a very clear way of strategic thinking that is not always in line with the prevailing doctrine of the day. Good for him. He's also, again, he is a larger-than-life figure. You can just read it immediately when you're reading the logs of Nelson versus the logs of even his British compatriots. Nelson is exciting. He is cool, right? Like, he has that je ne sais quoi. Like, he's a cool guy, and even you can see it at the time. His sailors are like, I want to be on the cool guy's ship, right? This is really fun. That is not Villeneuve. Villeneuve is not one of the cool guys. He is not a bad commander, though, right? He is not, in and of himself, he rose to his position within the French fleet not through just luck or incompetence. Well, a little bit of luck did help. Napoleon actually specifically says, that's what you are. You're a lucky guy. I'm gonna keep you around because you're lucky. Because at various junctures in his naval career, he had just gotten a little bit lucky, and maybe that's skill, maybe that's luck. And so he's in a position to get lucky again.
I mean, he's a cautious guy. I know he's one of the few who escaped the Battle of the Nile. He got his ships out of there. But I also know, like, Napoleon's on, like, his last straw with him, like, with his timidity.
Right. He is frustrated at his, I won't say refusal, but, Napoleon's plan really was, hey, wreak havoc in the West Indies to force a response, and then that we're going to get something out of that response. And Villeneuve doesn't do that. He hears that Nelson is chasing him, and so he runs. And that's okay. That's partly part of the plan is, well, we drew the British out. Now let me get back.
Yep.
But then he's starting to go try to break the fleet out at Brest, and he gets into a battle against the British. This is Vice Admiral Robert Calder comes in, and this is the Battle of Cape Finisterre. Right. And this is it's inconsequential, doesn't really actually do much for either sides. But Villeneuve runs from it, essentially. He's like, I can't do it. I can't get you out of Brest, right? Calder, interestingly, also is court-martialed later for his lack of aggression. Not cowardice, but lack of aggression in this battle. Mm-hmm. Fascinatingly, he's taken away from Nelson's fleet right before the eve of the battle. He's like, you got to go, sorry, buddy, you got to go back to England to face a court-martial because you're not aggressive enough. And Nelson's like, what are you do it. Like, I
Yeah.
need this ship. I need this guy. But he goes
Yeah.
back. So then Villeneuve says, he doesn't say it quite this way, but I think it's there. I don't trust Napoleon's strategic sense. He wants me to go to Brest. I don't think I can do that. I'm nervous. I'm nervous about what's going to happen if I do that. So he goes down to Cadiz. And that's where Napoleon says, okay, relieved of command.
Yeah.
Here is your replacement. I need somebody who will do what I tell them to do, and that's not you.
And meanwhile, there's Gravina, who I think is well respected, but for whatever reason, he's not in charge.
He's not, and he's not in charge because the Spanish are the junior partners here. Even though they bring a lot to the alliance, there's no ambiguity at any point in the Spanish and French relationship of who is the little brother, and it's always the Spanish. This goes from 1796 onwards, when they are making their making peace with the French, and then having the alliance with the French. It's always an unequal partnership. And this was actually true when they were allied with the British as well, right? When you look at Toulon in 1793, when the British and the Spanish are allied together against the French, the Spanish, again, no one respects them, which is ironic in a lot of ways, because at this point, the Spanish actually do have as much naval competence as the French do. The French lost a lot of their naval experience, to put it lack of a better term. They lost a lot of that experience, both because of the flight of the officer corps, the noble officer corps in the Revolutionary era, but also it's just attrited over time, right? They have not had major naval engagements, and they've lost a lot of that experience. The Spanish have lost some of that, but less. So they should be more of an active partner, but because of alliance reasons, they are the junior partner, no question.
Yeah, and the French ships, I mean, the French state, the finances have been poor for probably over a decade, so the ships haven't been maintained. Like you said, a lot of the office corps emigrated away, so the French Navy isn't what it once was, and I think that comes to bear here shortly.
So, and the other interesting thing that's worth noting right along that is one of the reasons that both the French and the Spanish don't have as much experience is because of the blockades that the British have put them under, right? The British do have command of the sea at this point, and you can see that by evidence of the blockades that they have. When you are the blockading ship, you are at sea. You are constantly running drills. You're there.
Good point.
For the blockaded ship, you're sitting a lot. And any naval commander can tell you that, idleness is the death of rigor, right? Like, and if you want to actually have an effective fighting ship, especially in the age of sail, expertise matters, and they're getting lazy. They're getting bored. They're at port. They're blockaded. They don't have the experience of actually doing naval battle.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Well, it seems Villeneuve gets tipped off that he's going to be replaced. So I think he's finally motivated to action. What are the forces involved? How many does each side have in terms of ships and men and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so, on the simplest way of 30, we'll just say 33 ships of the line combined, French and Spanish. And it's worth noting that the French ships and the Spanish ships in particular, they have bigger ships. They have more cannons, unequivocally. They have some of the biggest ships of the line that are at sea at that point, and they're in this battle, right? The British, on the other side, have 27 ships of the line. They are relatively unified. That's a big difference between a joint command versus a unified command. But in terms of sheer numbers, the British are outgunned. There's no two ways about it. In terms of the men involved, this is even more stark in a lot of ways, where the estimates are around 30,000 French and Spanish together, which that's a lot of people on these ships, right? It's a lot. They are packed full.
Right.
And interestingly, they are not at full complement. Particularly the Spanish are not at full complement for this battle. The British aren't really either, though. They have 17,000 ships or men combined together in their ships. And they also are feeling some of the burn of manning shortages, but they are more competent and more confident in the people that they have than the Spanish and French are.
Yeah, and so looking at it on paper before the battle begins, the French and Spanish have bigger ships. They have more men. And so I think that's all the more surprising, like what happens. Like it's just a rout. But before the battle, you're like, all right, well, this might be a good battle.
Right. And it's an interesting, like, Villeneuve wants to go out and take the battle after a fashion, right? And like this is to your point earlier that he knows he's going to be relieved and wants to put a lie to the rumors of his cowardice or his ineffectiveness. He's like, no, I have a bigger fleet. And that's part of the orders. Part of the orders that he has is if you encounter a numerically inferior British fleet, engage and destroy, right? And so he's like, okay, like what do I have here? A numerically inferior British fleet. I'm going to join battle. Do I actually think I'm going to destroy it? Probably not, but I am going to join battle with this numerically inferior fleet.
Okay, so he rolls the dice. How does the battle begin on October 21st, 1805? What are the French and Spanish doing?
Yeah, so this is a really key moment, going back to that discussion about forces, about the British know they have fewer guns, but they say our men are better. We are better at seamanship than the French and the Spanish. So what we need to do is get in close. We need to get in as close as we can and just run roughshod over them. The French and the Spanish, for their part, are anticipating a relatively standard battle. They know that this is a tactic, right? When Nelson crossing the T as he does, right? That's not something that is completely like, whoa, I can't believe anybody would ever do that. That's mind-blowing. It's a thing, right? It is a thing that can happen. It's just not something that Villeneuve thinks is going to happen because they are so roughly comparable that you don't need, as far as his strategic calculus is going, you don't need to take big risks. Nelson doesn't need to take a big risk in this fight. They just need to shoot each other a bunch, and then whoever's cannonballs hit the best is going to come out with more ships than the other side. And it's just a normal day at sea, right? Like, no big deal. Again, you have so many inconsequential naval battles that are legitimate naval battles that end in the fleets going their separate ways with damage.
Right.
That's what Villeneuve is thinking. He's setting up for that. He's setting up for just another day in the office. We'll see what happens, and let's go. That's not what Nelson's setting up for.
Yeah, and I think you just hit upon it there. Villeneuve thinks it's going to be another day at sea. We'll lob some cannonballs at them. They'll do the same to us, and we'll go our opposite ways. Meanwhile, Nelson gives the allegedly famous flag signal and speech, quote, "England expects that every man will do his duty," end quote. Why was he such a good motivator of men?
It really is hard to say. It's hard to say what it is that makes Nelson, right? I will say that the two immediate answers that come to mind, one is he is incredibly competent himself, right? He has displayed competence. He expects competence. And that's a big part of it, is what you're looking for. So when the men, he says, in this case, I expect you to do your duty, but this is a common theme all throughout his entire career, is saying, I expect you to be amazing. Why? Because I'm amazing. I know what it looks like. I know what amazing looks like. You can't fool me. Do your best, and I'll know if you're not. And that is enticing in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah, and I think there's another part of it too, that the guy's missing an arm. He has no sight in one eye. He's going to be like Napoleon or Marshal Ney. He's going to be at the front line with these guys battling also. He's not going to be like in some flagship in the back. Like, he's going to be right there with them.
Exactly. Again, leading by example. He's like, I expect you, my men, I expect you to do what I've already done and what I continue to do. Yes, it actually makes a lot more strategic sense for him to be middle or back, right? To be able to have a little bit more vision. But no, that's arguable. There's value in leading from the front, even from a naval engagement, just because of the distances involved. Sure. But it's incredibly risky in this scenario, as we will see, right? But again, he says, this is what I'm doing. I am leading by example. So when he says, I expect everyone to do their duty, there's this implicit understanding of, because I am, right? If you follow me, because I know where I'm going and I know what we're supposed to be doing. And that is appealing to his men. And yeah, he is a crystallization of the British pluck, right? Yeah. But also competence. And you can't disregard the fact that his arrogance, and it's not really arrogance, it's confidence that is not overconfident. I mean, the Battle of the Nile, right? Like, over and over, he displays the fact that his confidence in himself and in his men is warranted.
Right. And I remember Wellington had that meeting with him, and he was like, oh my God, that's the most arrogant person I've ever met in my life. But like you said, it's not arrogance if you've done everything you've said.
accurate self-assessment, right? That's what I tell people all the time. I'm like, no, I just understand myself.
Accurate self-assessment.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the other thing that it mirrors in here, and this goes even to the strategy, so the second to last message he gives is England expects that every man will do his duty. He initially says confides that every man will do his duty, but his signalman says, hey, I don't feel like spelling that. Can I just do expects instead? And Nelson's like, actually, that sounds better. Yeah, go with it.
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Because expects is one signal, whereas confides, they would have had to do like CONFIDES. So there actually is made more sense. But then he puts up another. After that, everyone is like, "Oh yeah," cheering. And Collingwood, the commander of the other line, says, "Of course I'm going to do my duty." Kind of jokingly, like, "No, that was a wasted message, right? Like, of course we're going to do our duty." But he says it kind of in good humor. But then the next message that he puts up is engage with the enemy more closely. And he leaves that is the signal, right? There is no other strategic guidance for his sailors. It's engage with the enemy more closely. And this gets to that other element of why he's such a compelling leader. He trusts his men, right? He says, I gave you the vision. We met for dinner the night before and I gave all my captains the vision. Now it's on you guys to execute. I'm not going to micromanage. I have confidence in you. Overconfidence, maybe, but not in this case, right? Like, I have confidence that all I need to do is tell you, go that way, and you're going to win.
Yeah. And Napoleon did that too, to a degree. He micromanaged it. But he said, look, go take that hill by 9:15 a.m. I don't care how you do it. I'm going to leave that to you, but that's what I expect of you.
Yep. Engage with the enemy more closely. Like, I love that line, because you can see so often even in naval battles where, going back to Clausewitz, right, fog and friction emerges, and you see this, that Nelson is planning for this. He says, implicit in that is, I know I'm not going to be able to give orders. Once this actually gets crazy, my whole strategy is predicated on not being able to give orders, because I don't want the other guy to be able to give orders too. And when we go head to head, my guys are better. And that's the strategic thinking is predicated on manipulating fog and friction and using his own skill and the skill of his sailors to win the day.
Well, let's talk about the opening engagement. Around noon, Nelson's column, and I know we don't have maps on this show. We're just going to describe it to you best mentally as we can. If you're seeing the video now, we have our hands up. Nelson's column attacks the Franco-Spanish center and rear, while Collingwood's column engaged the enemy's van. What happens from there?
So again, this is very much according to plan for Nelson. They split the Spanish Franco-Spanish line in three, where when Nelson goes in, and they pretty much immediately gets caught in a nasty fight with the French, or the French ships. I believe it is Villeneuve's ship at that point. They get caught in a nasty fight, but they punch a hole through the Spanish line. Now, the risk of this, and just to give a little bit of why crossing the T, everyone knows that it can be done, but it is a really risky thing to do. The risk of this is that Nelson's ship, while it's sailing towards the line, is just getting slammed by cannon fire that he can't realistically respond to, and nor can the ships behind him realistically respond to this barrage that is coming from nearly the entirety of the Franco-Spanish line. It is really risky.
Right, because the front of the ship doesn't have cannons on it, right? So
they like two at best, right?
So he's got to get through before he can fire.
Once he gets through, the tables turn, right? Good seamanship matters, because one of the calculations that goes into Nelson's thinking is that it's pretty poor sea conditions. It's not horrible, but it's pretty rough seas. So the ships are going up and down, right? And so that makes it really hard for the Spanish to hit. They're trying to gauge the height of the ships on these rolling seas, and sometimes the cannonballs are going straight into the water, sometimes far overhead. So there are other ways that Nelson is mitigating the risks that this strategy entails. And again, Villeneuve did not anticipate that this was the strategy that he was going to do. So once he punches through the line, chaos. That's what happens next, is really chaos. Deliberate chaos from the British side, but the ships keep funneling through that break, splitting off and keeping the line broken apart, and making it so that there can be no cohesive response from the Spanish or the French.
Yeah, and I think, again, you raised a good point. It's more than just having the most cannons or the most men. It's, how fast can you reload? How good are you at aiming on a rocky sea? How good are you at keeping the sails up to catch the wind? And like you said, if you're at port and you have a trained to do all these things. Maybe you're just not as good as the English.
By some estimates, and I'm always a little bit, when people sit and when you get the reports of the battle afterwards from the people who were at the battle, like the Spanish and the French are like, it seemed like the guns never stopped firing, right? They were always going. They at some point there is a reload time, right?
Sure.
But by most estimates, let's say it's a 3-to-1, right? That the British were getting 3 shots to every one shot of the Spanish and French. And that estimate that we had earlier, 33 to 27, if you triple the 27, because it's not just about the ships, it's about how fast they can shoot their cannons, right? Mm-hmm. And if you make it so that they are shooting 3 times as fast, all of a sudden that 27 starts looking a little bit like 60. And the Spanish feel outgunned. The French feel outgunned, even though they technically weren't.
Yeah. Well, we're engaged now, furious close quarters fighting. British ships like HMS Victory and Royal Sovereign are at point blank range, and quickly it seems the British are dominating. How's this possible? Just everything we're saying, or why aren't the French inflicting as much damage, I guess?
The 2 factors that come out here, one is the expectations, right? This was something that the British planned to do, and the French did not plan to do it. And so they are looking for additional guidance. All Nelson said was engage more closely, right? That's all the guidance he needed to give. And at that, he left it up the entire time. What are my orders? Engage more closely. Right. The Spanish and the French are like, what are my orders? And they're looking around and the line is split. It's messy, right? You can't see anything. And so there's just a delayed response. Now, in the actual hand-to-hand fighting that takes place, because you do get, you're getting the masts and the yardarms, they're getting tangled together in various cases as well. And this is where, yes, there should be a little bit more parity, but I don't want to put too much weight in this, but I can't help but say that the confidence of the men themselves, yes, it's skill as well. I think the British have more skill at hand-to-hand fighting. They have more skill at shipboard action. They have more skill there. But I would argue that the reason why you see it is a massive difference. Confidence matters so much. So that is, to me, the biggest explanation of why we see the massive amount of discrepancy between what they should have done on the Franco-Spanish side and what they actually achieved on the British side.
Yeah, and by 1:15, French ships are striking colors, some are sinking, some are running away, the Spanish are running away. It's over pretty quick.
It is. I would say it's over when the Victory punches through the Franco-Spanish column and doesn't go down, doesn't strike colors, doesn't falter really. At that point, it was going to be very difficult for the French and Spanish to win. And that, again, is partly why they act in the way they do, is because they know that I think they can assess, they can see on an individual sailor level and on a leadership level, we need to probably run, and they can't because they're split and it's a complete mess.
Yeah. And it's really interesting. Nelson realizes, oh my God, this is going to be my greatest victory ever. And he's had a lot of victories. But around this time, he's mortally wounded by a French sharpshooter. And I have a lot of questions about his death because, one, we don't know who shot him. We don't know the French sharpshooter's name is a mystery. Muskets of the age are notoriously inaccurate. Do you think this anonymous sharpshooter was aiming for Nelson? And do you think the sharpshooter was one of the killed in action casualties? What happened here?
I'll give you this is my sense. Do I know for sure? Of course not, right? But I do think there was probably aiming, right? I mean, this is one of the things that the French and the British did as well, but the French were pretty good at, was saying, let's pick off the officers, right? Like, this is command on a naval vessel is very delicate, right? Where, as we see in the kind of the macro sense of the battle, once that command structure dissolves, chaos ensues and fighting effectiveness is reduced almost to a negligible state. That's true in the microcosm of a ship as well, on a micro level of once that command structure is gone, if no one's giving the order to fire, your cannons are probably going to sit pretty quiet, right?
Right.
Now, the British have ways of mitigating this, knowing that that's a vulnerability. They drill in the chain of command. So this is not something that, in this case, it was not going to be a huge vulnerability, but this is the going in theory of why they are trying to pick off as many officers as they can. Now, does he see that it's Nelson? I would have to say probably. Like, he's a distinctive figure, and he looms in the French imagination just as he does in the British imagination.
Maybe the nature of the industry, because he doesn't die right off the bat. Like I think it goes into his spine. They have to bring him below deck.
Yeah. I've been on the Victory. They have the spot where Nelson fell, and you go down, and I'm a pretty tall guy, and I'm actually shorter than Hardy, Captain Hardy. I'm shorter than him, and like, this would be not very comfortable to be down here. It's why he was up on deck all the time, I guess. But yeah, it was absolutely a lucky shot, and I would bet that either the person who shot did not know, was just, I don't know that I hit Nelson, right? I shot at an officer. It was chaos. There was a lot of stuff. Did I hit him? I saw him go down. Maybe that was shrapnel. I don't know. There's so much stuff going on that it's likely that no one was going to be able to definitively say in that moment, that was my shot.
Yeah, you're right. There's quite a maelstrom of cannonballs and musket balls flying around and stuff blowing up.
Right. And you likely have 5 people taking the same shot. And most of the time, none of them are hitting. When one hits, you're not going to know exactly who's hit.
Well, you mentioned Hardy. What were Nelson's final moments like?
Yeah, he knows that his backbone, he says, they got me through the backbone, right? My backbone is shot, is gone. And he knows that there's likely no coming back from that. So sometimes we get trapped into thinking, oh, well, Nelson was the captain of the HMS Victory. No, Nelson was the admiral, and then Hardy was the captain, right? Hardy ran the ship, Nelson ran the fleet. So he and Hardy had a very close relationship, We're good friends and good colleagues. So when Nelson is shot, Hardy almost immediately comes to him, and Nelson is still trying to get a sense of what's going on. Like, have we won? I think we're doing pretty good, but I can't see right now. He's still trying to get these updates as they're taking him down below decks to get him into more comfortable and to get him whatever help they can. He sees one of the guys at the tiller, and he's like, oh no, you need to, do this instead of that. And he's trying to help out. Again, that competence of he is looking around while in excruciating pain, trying to do everybody's jobs for them in a bit of an arrogant way, but also in a way that endears him to people of like, don't worry, sir, I got this. Right?
Yeah.
You got other things to worry about. And yeah, it's hot, it's messy. He's asking for fans, he's asking for drinks. Like he's in a lot of pain. But at the very end, about 2:30, where I believe it's Hardy that says victory's complete, right? We like the metric that he gives is 15 of the 33 ships have struck their colors, and none of ours have, right? That is the devastating complete victory that Nelson envisioned, right? And that was already essentially a done deal, and that was what Nelson wanted. He was like, I am going for the knockout blow. Back to that original question of why does this loom so large in the public imagination? He went for the knockout blow and he hit it, right?
Yeah.
But he's below decks and he hears this, and he, theoretically his last words, thank God I've done my duty. I think this is probably not actually the last words. If I had to guess, that's put in afterwards as like part of the legend. What I choose to believe are his last words is the last words that we do know definitively that are recorded are "Kiss me, Hardy," right? Which is kind of spawned some like, oh, well, maybe there's more going on there. But this is just I would read it as a pretty clearly kind of brotherly affection of, I'm dying,
right? And you want your best friend close to you, and yeah,
exactly. And Hardy leans down, gives him a kiss on the forehead, and Nelson passes away. He may have murmured at the end, thank God I've done my duty. I think that's possible. If that happened, good for him. I think it's more likely that in that final moment, he is in that moment happy to know that his duty has been done.
Well, let's discuss the aftermath and the outcome of the battle. As you mentioned before, I think British victory is total. 22 Franco-Spanish ships were captured or destroyed. No British ships are lost. Do we know how many men died on each side or were casualties?
It's a very, very small amount for the British. Let's say for the French and Spanish, it's around 4,000 killed in action, with another 7-ish taken prisoner, 7,000 taken prisoner. I mean, honestly, that's a massive killed in action account or a killed in action number for a naval battle. You can get a lot of casualties when the ships go down, but because usually it is just a clear like, okay, we've lost, disengage. And this one, it was very difficult for them to disengage. So for the British, the about 1,500 is the high. That's total killed and wounded. It's a lot less killed, 500 killed, with about 1,000 wounded. There's some difficulty in assessing all of this, but general numbers about right around there.
Yeah, so it's almost like a 5 or 6 to 1 ratio. I mean, it's bad. Napoleon's reaction, and we have to discuss what happens to Villeneuve allegedly in prison later. What is Napoleon's thought of all this?
So Napoleon obviously not well pleased, but it's also important to note that he's already called off the invasion, right? Trafalgar is not an afterthought, but as far as the invasion of Britain goes, there is not going to be an invasion of Britain in 1805. Does not matter if the tables are turned, right? Like if the Franco-Spanish fleet has as much success as the British one did, right? If you completely flip the tables. Now, eventually, in that case, yes, Britain would have been invaded because command of the seas would have been lost. But regardless, those troops that had been on the border of the English Channel, they were out at Ulm and then Austerlitz, right? Like they were gone. Yeah. Doing really impressive things for the record. So Napoleon's reaction to this is certainly frustration at Villeneuve, right? Frustration at the loss, recognizing that this was probably one of the best shots that he had, if not the best opportunity in a specific battle, that from here rebuilding the fleet to be able to contest sea power was going to be incredibly difficult. It's not to say he doesn't, right? He does invest in naval rearmament and rebuilding so that he doesn't completely give it up to the British.
Right.
But from this point, his strategy to attack Britain fundamentally changes, becomes far more economic and diplomatic as opposed to military.
What happens to our friend Villeneuve, though?
Yeah, he's captured. Now, Gravina, for the record, he has his arm shattered and dies from his wounds, just to kind of close that. He dies about 6 months later. And when he dies, he kind of says, I'll be in the company of Nelson, right? He has this honorable end, as opposed to Villeneuve, who does not necessarily have nearly as honorable of an end. He is, I don't want to say he's a scapegoat, because I actually think he is to blame for a lot of this, right?
Well, yeah, and I'm going to ask you that too. Like when we Monday morning quarterback it, like what percentage is Villeneuve at fault? Obviously, Napoleon has some fault in it.
So yeah, Villeneuve, he makes the wrong call in that he sails out, and Gravina says we shouldn't sail out, right? We should wait for reinforcements. Even something as it's not insignificant that there had just been a bout of yellow fever. Anytime you go to the Caribbean, you're going to probably have some yellow fever, and that happened for the Franco-Spanish fleet. And so Gravina, at the very least, is saying, let's just recover and then go out. These things are not in our favor. Villeneuve says, no, we're going out. That's a bad decision. When faced with Nelson, though, when faced with kind of the really pretty spectacular leadership that Nelson provides, it's hard to say that there would have been a different outcome, right? So if you put Gravina instead of Villeneuve, all that changes is that the battle doesn't take place right then.
Right.
But I do blame Villeneuve for that decision to engage in an unfavorable scenario and thinking that he was going to have what we call a cooperative adversary, right? That your adversary is going to think in the same way that you do and do what you want him to do. Nelson was an uncooperative adversary, and Villeneuve made very poor assumptions thinking that it was going to go his way.
Well, then he makes another bad decision. The British release him from captivity, and for some unknown reason, he goes back to France. That's the last place I would have gone.
Yeah. It's hard to read whether he is a true believer or not, right? This is one of those difficult things to assess. He is in the Navy before the French Revolution, drops the noble affectation during the French Revolution, stays in, again, is lucky at the Nile, things like that, but he's committed, right? And I would go so far as to say that he is a patriot, right? He is someone who is not just in it for his own personal aggrandizement or wealth. He's in it because he believes in France. And therefore, to a certain extent, we can say believes in Napoleon, right? That France is under, like, he wants to be part of this vision, and his patriotism is not valued, put it that way, and ultimately likely commits suicide at the end.
Right, yeah. Napoleon throws him in prison. They find him dead in his cell. I mean, you can conspiracy talk that Napoleon had him killed, whatever.
I lean towards the Occam's razum simpler explanation that he was a patriot who came home wanting to do what he could, was thrown into prison, said your services are not just not needed, but you are not what we want. And we want to erase your memory. And that cognitive dissonance resulted in him just saying, well, I have nothing to live for. I've lived for this country. I've lived for this Navy for most of my life. And if I can't live for that, then what is there worth living for?
Right. Well, let's talk strategic consequences. Obviously, this ends Napoleon's hope of invading Britain, establishes British naval supremacy for the rest of the Napoleonic Wars. As you alluded to at the beginning of our podcast, secures British naval superiority for the next 100 years. Is that accurate? I mean, I guess it is in Europe at least. Maybe it is worldwide.
I mean, it's not that no one else sails, right? And this is kind of one of the things that it matters what you do with it. When you have that power, when you have that command of the sea, what do you do with it matters. And the British could have said, we are going to be heavy-handed. But really what they did was go into the 19th century and establish their 19th century version of imperialism through a little bit similar to what the United States does in terms of the freedom of navigation, saying we are going to benefit most from free seas. And so we want to protect the freedom of the seas. If you want to try to contest that, you're going to have to contend with the greatest navy of the time. And we are going to grow our empire because we are just better. We have more ships. We have a head start. We have all of this in our back pocket. So what you do with that control matters, but it was Trafalgar that established that control.
Well, I guess final question is, what is the legacy of Trafalgar? I mean, it is a very important battle, but it doesn't really stop Napoleon. He goes on for another 10 years. So it's not like a Waterloo or it's a clinching victory, but does it alter the overall strategic situation?
I was talking with someone about Napoleon and talking about the fact that Napoleon didn't lose hardly any battles. And was like, well, what about Trafalgar? I'm like, Napoleon didn't lose Trafalgar. Like, that wasn't Napoleon's. Well, there's a little bit of Napoleon's fault in the sense that he was the head of state at the time, right. But this was not a military loss that we're going to pin on Napoleon. This is a military loss we're going to pin on Villeneuve. Right. So this is where that dual hat for Napoleon gets really interesting. He is the head of state, and as head of state, he is ordering this as a military maneuver, but this is not him being the military head here. So does it change his military ability? Does it change his military ambitions? Ulm, Austerlitz, Jena, like we get some incredible military victories on the continent that showcase that Napoleon is absolutely a force to be reckoned with. But as I was thinking about this podcast, reflecting on Trafalgar, one of the things that I hit on that I hadn't actually hit on before was this tension between Halford Mackinder, who has this rimland thesis, right? That the seat of power, this is a little bit Corbettian as well in terms of naval theory, but the seat of power is on land, that if you want to have geopolitical or geostrategic control, you need to control the heartland and then contest the rimlands. That's Mackinder's thesis. Now, contrary to that is Alfred Thayer Mahan, who says if you want to have geopolitical control, especially if you're an island nation or a nation like the United States bounded on two sides by the sea, what you don't need the heartland, you need the command of the sea. You need sea lines of communication. That's how you actually exert power and geopolitical influence. And Trafalgar plays into that, right? Because you have the British having the Mahanian vision of control. They can't actually do anything on the continent for quite a while. Napoleon has control of the continent, of the heartland. And so you see these two visions of what does power actually look like and how do you actually utilize geopolitical power and authority and position. You see them in the post-Trafalgar world, where Napoleon is ascendant on land and the British are unchallenged at sea. And we see which one wins, honestly. And I'm not just a Naval War College homie here, right? Like, this is like Napoleon struggles with the fact that he cannot command the sea, whereas the British struggle at times with the fact that they cannot command the land, but find a way to influence it nonetheless. Right? They do find a way to influence what happens on land using the availability of sea power. And so one of the legacies of Trafalgar in this broad sense is a vindication. It's not a vindication because Mahan comes much later, but it's almost the kernel of Mahan's idea, the kernel of a lot of the naval strategic thinking that we have right now of how do you turn naval power into long-lasting influence. Trafalgar's the template for that. Trafalgar shows what's possible.
The all-new 2026 Hyundai Palisade Hybrid doesn't just turn heads. It commands respect. With its stunning exterior, luxurious interior with available captain seats, and spacious third-row seating and equipped with advanced technology, you and the family are making a statement before you even step out. Okay, Hyundai. Visit HyundaiUSA.com to learn more and experience the all-new 2026 Palisade Hybrid today.
Are you a forward thinker? Then you need an HR and finance platform that thinks like you do. Workday is the AI platform that helps propel your organization, your workforce, and your industry into the future. Workday, moving business forever forward.
I like you recognize your bias there, though. That was good.
A little bit. I actually like Mackinder a lot. I think he's got a lot of value. And thinking about Trafalgar was so important to Mahan. And looking at what Napoleon does, you can see Mackinder kind of make some claims there, too.
And I think there's a legacy on Nelson's part, too, because the guy, personal-wise, had a lot of drama and scandal. In this end, even though he had all that going on, his mistress and all that, and what a way to end, like in a blaze of glory with your finest victory. Like, it's just incredible.
It is, and it did become a big part of the British mythos, right? I mean, you go to Nelson's column, Trafalgar Square, right? That is the center point of London in a lot of ways. It's so critical to who they are. And like I said earlier, it helps that he didn't, like, he had the drama, but he didn't actually do anything. Like, he didn't have the opportunity to ruin his reputation. Right. And I don't think he would have, to be fair. Nelson was a skilled operator in a lot of ways, but it gives the British something to latch onto in terms of the peak, unadulterated, unsullied image of what it is to be British. And British at sea, right? Like, Wellington is brilliant in a lot of ways, but Wellington does not have that same mythical quality. And I think that's in no small part because he's his army, right? Like, the identity marker is not there for the British sense of self, whereas for Nelson it is.
And he goes on, Wellington, to have mixed results kind of as a prime minister, and he lives a long life, and maybe he doesn't have that glory that he had at Waterloo when that was the peak, kind of like Nelson at the peak at Trafalgar. If Wellington had died at Waterloo, what a great blaze of glory. But yeah, if you live long enough, maybe your star isn't as impressive as it is at your peak.
Right. And there is, the British Navy becomes such a core part of who they are and what their power is and what their identity is. It had been before that as well, but this solidified it and rigidified it in a lot of ways that you see last into the 20th century, and even to a certain extent still today, right? The Battle of Trafalgar is essentially it's certainly a naval holiday, and it's a holiday. Yeah, big part of who they are as a nation.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that, Josh. Excellent overview of Trafalgar. Really good stuff. Again, Josh is going to appear at Politics and Prose in Washington, D.C. in October and January. If you want to go online and find that, I recommend it. And we thank him always for his time.
This is always fun. Have a blast, and hopefully I didn't make too many hand movements for those who are just listening. I gesticulate wildly, but yeah, always fun. Hope this was useful.
Yeah, and again, we'll put all episodes online on YouTube. All the videos that we record go on YouTube. If you don't have Spotify and you want to see the videos, please check out our YouTube channel. And Josh Meeks, thanks so much, bud.
Have a good one.